Oh boy, am I hungry. I want fries, a hamburger. No, make that 2 fries. You want anything? What's your special today?
Episode 3. Welcome to the Northwest Builders Podcast. This is a podcast where we get together and we're looking to gain insights and information that bring value to builders in the Pacific Northwest. And we do it as we enjoy lunch and just share fun and informative conversation. So my guest today is Graydon Holden with Forma Construction. He's a superintendent out there, and we're currently working together on a project called the Shelton Veterans Village. So pretty exciting stuff.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're here.
Invitation.
You bet. So we're going to eat a lunch today from the Brick, and we'll go ahead and get that unpacked here. Hopefully we got some silverware if we need it. We'll see. Graydon, I think you went for the Reuben. You want to see if that's...
Yeah.
They didn't mark them, so we've only got 2 options. We can't be too far off.
I think that's it, man.
Oh, hey. We'll call it good. Yep.
So.
And I've got a turkey sandwich that they call the Walrus with a Z, and I have no idea where that came from. Would you like one of these iced teas?
Be perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. There you go. And in case that's not all enough, I also got us a quesadilla to munch on.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. What I've been finding out as I've done this, got a few of these under our belt now, is it takes a little bit to carry on a conversation while you got food in your mouth.
Well, it's probably a lot like work. You got to eat when you can, and you pretty much don't stop talking and answering questions.
That's right. So don't be shy.
All right.
Feel free to just dig in. So what I'd like to do is just get started with some background. So like I said, we go back a ways.
The names anyway.
Yeah, worked with your dad a bit in the past and that sort of thing. But tell us all a bit about how you got where you are today. So, and let's go all the way back to high school and just kind of talk about, how'd you get started working and that meandering path that got you where you are today.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you worked with my dad back in the day, and I remember your name floating around our place. There was a couple of folks that he worked with pretty regularly, Truss Components, and there's an insulation company. There was a guy named Herb he was always the guy that my dad went to on all these projects that he did. And, we moved down from Alaska in 1986, and he started just building houses again.
Oh, okay.
Before he moved up there in the early 70s, he had a company with another fella up in Woodinville, a guy named Ron Bundy, and they built houses together. It's called Hollywood Hills Builders.
Oh, really?
And because they were in an area up around Woodinville somewhere called Hollywood Hills. And anyway, then they ended up teaming up to go work a contract for Universal Seafoods up in Dutch Harbor, Alaska.
Oh, gotcha.
They went up there for, I think it was a 10-month contract, and he was there for 12 years. So... yeah.
That stretched out a little bit. Yeah.
It seemed like a good fit for that season. And then when we moved down here, he started building homes again. And so, he'd worked with Truss Components, and I remember hearing your name floating around. And so, when I got back in touch with a couple of projects over the last, 8 or 10 years, I've gotten to work with you guys quite a few times, I guess. But, so I ended up points throughout high school, going and working with my dad. Even in grade school, he'd bring me out and, set nails in the subfloor around the rim around the outside of the building and set a bunch of nails and give me a hammer.
Yeah.
And then he'd go take care of business, and I'd sit out there two hands swinging a hammer, trying to pound these nails in the floor, thinking I'm being a big help, where really he's giving me something to do that's just going to cover up with the wall plate later.
Right. That's you wouldn't think of giving a kid a hammer as being something to keep him out of trouble.
Yeah. Well, if you can direct that
Right.
trouble into, putting nails into some subfloor is probably not the worst thing in the world.
Right. I'm gonna interrupt for just a second because I just realized that they did not give us any napkins, and I don't want to expect you to use your shirt while we're going here. So
It's a work shirt, man.
Yeah, just in case anyone was wondering how far apart are we, it's around the table, and that's it. So
Yeah. And we're not
And,
remoted in or anything at this point.
right, and we'll just go ahead and give a thanks to Ryan and Berg Marketing here, helping us get the podcast recorded, and Ryan gave us a thumbs up. I think the camera people aren't supposed to talk, so something like that.
One of those
He's shaking
things.
his head now.
Yeah.
So awesome. You got an opportunity to start getting your feet wet.
Get my feet wet as a young kid, and somewhere in early high school, sophomore year, I think, I started just kind of working some small projects with my dad and doing, framing and finish carpentry and hanging sheetrock, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then for my senior, excuse me, this is the
This is
one
real.
precarious portion of
Yeah.
eating lunch and
Mhm.
doing an interview. For my senior project, we built a house. So
Oh.
we did from the ground up. We did a spec house out in Mason County, and
Were you at Shelton High School or?
no, actually, I in fifth grade was my last year in public school. My mother
okay.
actually started. She was going to start homeschooling me, and it ended up kind of morphing into. She started an accredited private school, and she ran
No
that
kidding.
for 25 years.
Wow.
That's where I graduated. But all of my extracurricular, playing football, taking, I think I took keyboarding and a few other things that I went to Shelton High for. And,
Right.
But yeah, so my senior project went and built a spec house, and it was pretty much me and my dad.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. I think we got trusses from you guys for that project. In fact, that would have been 97, I think, 96, 97.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really the first time I did a whole house start to finish, and got to be part of we poured the foundation, the footings. I was out there for seeing some of the land getting cleared, and then framing it all and doing the finish work. We hung all the rock and taped it
nice.
out. And,
Did you guys actually finish the house in the course of your senior year?
yeah, I mean, I guess it was probably just after graduation that we would have gotten the C of O on it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was a fun experience, and I remember friends of mine commenting at the time, like, "Oh, it's so cool that you know how to do this," and stopping and trying to realize that impact, because growing up with a dad who did construction, it wasn't something that, I mean, like now if I go talk to a buddy who's like really into stock trading, like talk to me about this world that I don't really understand.
Right.
And you had a dad or family member or somebody who this was their thing, and they kind of introduced you. So it wasn't like stepping off a plank into the unknown. It was like walking into the next room. It was pretty familiar for you.
Right.
And so thinking about that, putting myself in that position with those thoughts at that time, like, oh yeah, there's a lot of my friends have no reference for if I was going to put a light switch in a wall, what's inside that wall? Like, what am I going to hit?
Right.
How do you do this? And realizing the benefit of just kind of having that handed to you. You know, like I didn't have to work for that. I just grew up in a home where my dad did it, and I was exposed to it. And just how there's a lot of benefits in life that are like that. whether it's work or finance or access to certain things that you just kind of take for granted. And anyway, yeah, I think that was realizing that at that point was an interesting thing to go through.
You were gaining something that you didn't realize you were gaining at the time.
Yeah, a perspective that I think maybe a lot of people. I'm not sure how everybody gets that, but eventually, hopefully, everybody gets that somewhere.
Right. So your dad worked in construction, went up to Alaska and worked in processing.
Actually, it was construction.
Oh, it was construction up there as well.
They
Okay.
ran the beach crew and built all the infrastructure on the island and all that stuff. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people, have a memory probably of their parents going to work to make ends meet, maybe not talking about work a whole lot, maybe looking back and not really even thinking their parents liked what they did a whole lot. But it sounds like it was different for your dad.
Yeah. I got to be I was pretty exposed, to the work and that, the blue collar lifestyle of we're going to get up and go get to work and, we'll close our eyes for 10 minutes at coffee break and we get back to work. And
your dad really enjoyed what he did.
He did. I think he had a hard time when it was harder to do it. And I think part of that may have come from the fact that it was kind of, for a season, it looked like it was all taken away in it would have been in the late 60s. I think he had a back surgery. And so it was quite a thing, especially back in the day, where they said, you're going to have to figure out how to walk again. You're going to go through physical therapy, and you're never going to work again. But
boy, I would have never known.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, he was able to come back from that. After that, initially, he worked for there was some kind of a job therapy company in Seattle that's where he met my mom, actually. But it was like a job placement for folks who'd gone through the prison systems.
Okay.
And so he did that for a season, and then after he got together with my mom, they got married, and he started building again, and then headed up to Alaska. Yeah, it was so having that kind of, well, I don't get to go do what I'm good at and what I enjoyed. He started as a sheetrocker with his dad in Seattle.
Okay. Yeah.
And not being able to do that, I think, was probably pretty impactful. And so when he was able to get back to it, I think it always seemed like he enjoyed it, even on days where you kind of want to throw your tools through the window.
Right. Well, I guess we all have those days, don't we?
Yeah, I try to stay away from windows on those days.
Yeah, right.
Or tools, maybe.
So you had your exposure early on. Through high school, you did the project, the build a house for your senior project.
Yeah.
You had options after you got out of high school, I assume. Did you go straight into working with your dad? Did you go into a different career? What was that like?
So coming out of high school, I did continue just doing construction. I'd looked at college and realized that at that point, I couldn't identify anything that I wanted to go learn specifically. And if I could do it over again, I might do it a little differently. But the thought of going to school just to go to school and pay somebody money for, continued education of maybe I'll use it for something when I could just go continue learning what I was already getting good at and getting paid for. It just didn't seem like a real smart option to go.
Right.
I'm going to go spend money on something that I really have no reference for an actual return on yet. But I always kind of figured it. If something came up and I thought, I really want to learn this, I'd have no problem going to school to do it.
Right.
But I think the further you get from that, it kind of creates this. It's a little bit like the golden handcuffs on a job. Like, okay, well, this has just become old hat or my program, and I can continue doing it, and it's harder the further you get down the road to stop doing it and go back and change course. So, yeah, and I never did go to college. I thought about doing some construction management stuff, but the reality is stopping doing what I'm doing to go learn how to do what I'm doing. It's hard to gauge the return on that investment if it would be worth. I'm sure there are guys who went to school to do this stuff. They have some knowledge on some things that probably I'm completely missing. Or the way I've picked it up is maybe not the way that they've learned to do it.
Right.
But I don't know that that's worth the cost on both time and finances. So.
Right. Yeah, as someone with a similar career track, I have looked back a lot and wondered, would it have been beneficial to go to school? And probably, like you said, there have been things that I would have picked up. Thank goodness there are a lot of good books available. YouTube is a great resource.
Absolutely.
Yeah, kind of tough to imagine. I think a lot like you, I actually was going to school when I started working at Truss Components and got to a point where I didn't see a reason to continue pursuing that because I felt like I was already on a pretty good track.
Yeah.
And of course, at that point, never figured I would own Truss Components, and there's a whole lot different to running a business than there is, selling for a business or, being a manufacturer or stuff like that. But tough to justify. So, that kind of brings up a good point, though, and I think we'll come back a little bit to, what happened between that point where you decided you were going to carry on in construction and where you're at today. But, there's constant talk about not enough people going into the trades.
Yeah, goodness.
Yeah. Would you like to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good subject. There's a lot of work to get done, and I came up, doing residential construction, non-union, out in Mason County is where I started, and I was making. When I was really swinging a hammer, I was probably making $12 with my dad when I started, and the first house that let's see, in the 90s, he kind of took his bags off, and he actually, speaking of this, went back to school and did computer-aided drafting, which was kind of an emerging thing.
Right.
He had done hand drafting in high school, and he'd utilized it throughout his career. But doing computer-aided drafting, he went to South Puget Sound and took some courses and got whatever he got out of that and went to work for Foster & Williams Architecture in Shelton.
Okay, yeah.
And so, early 90s, I have memories of going and visiting him at the office where he's, working on a computer, drawing houses. And so that whole season when he went and started drawing, we worked on a couple of little projects here and there, but it wasn't until I was high school building the spec home house with him that from there I went and did some kind of short-term mission work with a group. And so I was out of town for about 2 years. During that time, I was actually able to use a lot of stuff that I learned in being able to do homes and emergency structures and things like that for the folks that we were going to help out. So that was nice. But when I came back, I started doing homes on my own. I started a construction company, and we focused on custom homes, framing and finish, and just working for clients who most of them were referrals from at this point, my dad had moved on from Foster and Williams and started drafting just on his own from home.
Right.
And so he's drawn a bunch of these custom homes for folks, and then they're looking for a contractor. And he said, well, I know one. You can reach out to him and see what he says. And so I'd end up building a bunch of these houses that he'd draw, and that was a lot of fun. He drew some cool places. But the first one I did, I think I did for time and material like $14 an hour.
Oh my goodness.
And I was running the show. Like when somebody showed up, they're talking to me.
Yeah.
And I was my early 20s. And that was a while ago. I wasn't making enough money and I didn't know enough. But it was a place to start, and it was a fun season. I got to build with a couple of friends. I hired them on at my company, and we just ran 3-4 guys, and we'd go frame these places and then trim them out, and it was a good, fun way to do stuff. But the whole kind of the open shop or non-union versus union, I went to the union here 3-4 years ago when I went to work for Forma, and it's been good, but coming up to that, I had never really been looking at that. It hadn't been on my radar. My older brother's been with the union up in Seattle for years and years, and my dad was not, and my uncle was, and so it was kind of back and forth. And where we were, there just wasn't a lot of union work, especially back in the 90s out in Mason County. There's not a lot of local work for union carpenters, and I wasn't interested in driving an hour and a half to go to work.
Up in Seattle.
Yeah. So, but in my late 20s, 30s, I'd kind of gassed myself out physically and messed up my back pretty good, and quite a few things that, you're not going to be able to maintain that level until retirement. So realizing that, man, if you want to go work open shop, that's great, but you don't really have the benefits side of that. You're kind of on your own on a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And so being able to get in the union and work within that environment has been a good shift for me. And I'm not a expert on either side necessarily, but so far for me it's been a good thing.
And you've had an opportunity to move away from carrying the bags yourself at this point.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the biggest thing, is my my position means that I can leverage all the things I've learned between the constructability and soft skills and things with clients and owners, and help create a successful project without having my bags on, so that if I can't walk one day, I can still do my job.
Right. Yep.
So, but getting people on site to do the work has been a struggle for a while, and the union has some avenues to get in there, and then if you're not interested in union stuff, putting your bags on and going to work for somebody, going and learning that stuff is fine too. That's how I came up. That's how a lot of the guys that I work around came up, and it's a good trade, getting out and building stuff with your hands and making stuff happen. And so anybody who's interested in going and making money and using your hands, there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, there sure is. Awesome. So, talking about kind of wearing yourself down, and it's kind of always been the saying that you're not going to be able to work out in the field past about 50. That's kind of the anticipated lifespan of a construction laborer. What are we doing these days to help out with that? I mean, it's no secret that we're dealing with an aging workforce.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a great career to get into, and it would be nice if more people were looking at it, coming out of high school and that sort of thing. But if someone was coming out of high school and looking at a career in the building trades, would they need to look at, a career that's going to be over when they're 50, or are there things that are happening that could help out with that?
Well, honestly, one of the big things that's different between the culture in the union and the culture where I came up, non-union, is, especially with Forma, the focus on job site safety and the care of workers, like long-term, making sure people are okay.
Yeah,
is it's a reasonable expense that is being fronted by companies to ensure that their workforce is taken care of. And it's not something I came up with. It was, don't go get a wheelbarrow. We'll just pack it. Come on, let's just get it done.
Yeah.
Be smart, but it was a lot of, 80s guy mentality of, well, just rub some dirt on it, let's get back to work, or get up there and get it done. Like, well, there's nothing to tie off on up there. Well, so don't fall down.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, those are all things that the safety culture that companies like Forma are working to really foster. It goes a long way, when you don't have industrial and construction trade accidents and injuries. That makes a difference when you're telling your guys, hey, if something weighs over 50 pounds, let's go get help. And first step, figure out, is this something I can, if we can shuttle it with a hand cart or a dolly, or, move it with a forklift. We have the means to be able to do that. Like, you don't have to pick up, 4 bundles of shingles on your shoulder and crawl up the ladder.
Right. You're not going to get ribbed if you're not carrying 2 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood.
Yeah. I mean, that's a constant.
Sorry, there was a jalapeno in there.
You found it.
I did.
There's just a constant fostering that has to happen in order to maintain that and help it grow. Because still, I fight. I'm a tough guy. I'm in decent shape. I can pick that up. I can do. But I've got back problems enough that even at home, my wife's like, be careful when you pick up the kids, because I've had substantial issues, and it can put me down for, my last run, I was out of work for like 3 months.
Oh boy, yep.
And that's stuff that really impacts you when you make your wage by when you're proletariat, and if you're not working, you're not getting paid.
Right.
Especially if, a lot of this stuff that can be basically a career injury, accumulative, it's not something that's easy to go get taken care of anywhere.
Right.
And for me personally, it's not something that I would want to tag a particular company. Like, if I've worked for myself for 15 years, another company for 10, another company for 5, it's pretty unfair. The last guy gets to foot the bill for all the silly things that I've done or been encouraged to do by myself or at other companies. That, okay, well, he's got to cover all that because
yeah, that's a pretty mature perspective on that.
Well, yeah, I don't have mature perspectives on everything, but I'm trying to develop those as I go.
Right. So do you see a difference in the adoption of the safety mindset between different generations, being easier or more difficult?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the guys who are, you kind of have this thing where you mentioned kind of the aging workforce, the guys that are going to age out of field construction, where you kind of have the two lines. The guys who are doing it still either have been through a mess and they're all beat up and it's a struggle to put your bags on and go to work every day, or you have the guys that have figured out the pace they need to maintain to be healthy and safe at work. So you have, I think, those two kind of views from that age group, and then you're going to fight those in whatever demographic you look at across the workforce. But trying to figure out how you foster the things that are going to help guys stay healthy long term. You're not going to be able to stop 100% of everything that's detrimental to the human body, especially when you're out there, beating yourself up a little bit every day. But the things that are implemented in construction now, some of the stuff that's automated, some of the stuff that we've got all kinds of equipment that can do things that when I was growing up, it was you rig something up, or you go get a ladder and you're packing stuff, you're reaching over lengths you shouldn't be reaching, you're putting yourself in a position where you could get hurt. Companies like Forma doing what they're doing as far as, hey guys, this costs us money, but we value you as individuals. And over the long term, it's going to be better for everybody if you're healthy. Like, I'd rather not have to explain this to a different guy tomorrow, the stuff you're doing, because if you fall off a ladder or twist your ankle or whatever it is, whoever takes your spot tomorrow, I've got to get them up to speed. Yeah. So that's just at a basic level, it's not optimal to have your guys in a situation where they could end up getting hurt, put themselves out of the field. So
right, I can hear someone listening to this podcast and thinking, all that safety stuff is great, but I've got a job to do. It's expensive to get all that rolling, and so Forma's obviously put a lot of thought into the value behind doing the job safely. You mentioned a minute ago about not needing to train the next person to do the job that you just trained this other guy to do. From a business perspective, how does Forma? I'm sure it's bigger than that. How does Forma justify the expense of having a robust safety program? And I guess I'll just ask, is it more expensive to have a robust safety program, and does it slow a job down to have a robust safety program?
That's a really good question. It's probably a bit of a complicated answer, but the bottom line is, best case scenario, if you're a company that runs light on safety, you get away with it for a long time. Worst case scenario, somebody gets hurt or somebody dies. And I don't know, I've never sat down with our CFO or somebody and said, if we did it with zero safety, how much would it have cost us and the client? And then done let's sit down and do a real in-depth risk analysis of, well, how much safety could we cut to get by? And I think that goes to just the culture that the ownership, the stakeholders at Forma have decided, hey, we're going to invest in this. And it might cost us some bids because we carry, quite a bit more in some of our costs for just working on site. Like, it's just, we're gonna use a forklift for picking that up. We're gonna have a lift here to get the guys up in the air and do that. And we understand that in a boom lift, we're gonna make sure you guys are tied off, and that's gonna slow you down. Like, yeah, it's a whole lot faster to jump in an aerial lift, not tie off, not have the your drag rope anchored to your basket, and then if you can't quite reach, go ahead and climb up the side of the thing. Like, that's very quick. But also, slipping, falling, cutting something off, that's quick too. And it's hard to undo that stuff. And so working for a company that has put in the investment and financially and the financial investment as well as just the time, effort to foster that culture of, no, guys, it matters whether or not you guys are okay. It matters to us more that you guys are going to be here tomorrow than whether or not you get that wrapped up tonight. Right. So come down, let's go get a different ladder or a different lift or whatever it is. It's the right tool for the right job. instead of getting up there with a screw gun and you're trying to screw the thing in and you got to knock it over a little bit, you don't have a hammer, we'll bang on it with your screw gun. Let's not do that. Let's just go get the right tool
Sure.
for the right job. And, I can't say that it's going to be cheaper to get that job done that way. But I think if you're not looking just at the dollar, the value of what you get out of, long term, your guys are okay. Your job gets done well, efficiently. I mean, it takes a little more planning instead of just racing around putting out fires all day long.
Right.
But that's not the type of scheduling and construction management that we work to practice anyway. So doing some good planning ahead and ensuring that you have what you need before you need it is a big part of that.
Yeah. That's we've implemented a lot of safety protocols, here, as you would imagine. One of them that wasn't required was having the guys wear cut-resistant gloves. And, as you can imagine, the truss plates, they got the sharp teeth and I guess trusses were pretty much a thing for about 30 years before I started. And I worked for about, 25 years in the truss industry before we ever did anything like that.
Yeah.
And it was just everyone's fingers were like hamburger, and it's just kind of what you expect, and no one really thought about it.
Yep.
And we went to the cut-resistant gloves and had a lot of complaining at first. It's tough to get buy-in, but you sell it. And after a while, first the production went down because you can't feel what you're doing and that sort of thing. A couple of weeks later, production numbers are starting to go up because people can reach into a bin of plates and not have to worry about cutting their hands when they do it. And now that that's been something that's been in place for a few years, I mean, the guys wouldn't even think about, grabbing a truss plate without their gloves on. And so I think it's having a safety culture becomes self-perpetuating. Not that it doesn't ever require effort to maintain, but, you know.
Well, that's a really good point. And I think it's a lot like anything that's healthy, exercise. Like, okay, well, I don't want to get out of bed and go exercise. And there's never been a point where I did it and then I was like, oh, this is easy. It takes care of itself. Mm-hmm. But when you practice that and implement it over and over and you get some repetition, then today when I wake up, exercises I'm doing are easier simply because of my mental state of expecting it, walking into it, and having gone through it, and then telling my body over a period of time, hey, this is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. It becomes easier and easier. But there's always the danger of if one day somebody just says, you know what, I'm not going to go get that, or I'm not going to get out of bed and exercise this morning. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow it's a little bit harder to make the right decision. And so, it's anytime I see a company that's doing stuff that, number one, it's required is mm-hmm. great.
Yeah.
When you identify things that, okay, this is a hazard in our job environment, it may not be required, but looking at it, we think this is a good idea. And mm-hmm. it's gonna help us out, not just like financially where we're going to make a better bottom line, but the guys who work here, this is going to help them see that we care about them, long term. They may not see it tomorrow when we say, hey, you got to make sure you're doing this.
Right.
But down the road, and that's some of that is how you implement it, so that can be a little bit of a challenge because sometimes when you're just tired of talking about it, hey, go get your stuff on. You got to have your glasses, whatever it is. You can come across as a bit of a jerk, but the reality is, I've been hit pretty close to the eyeball with some stuff before growing up. And I was just thinking a half inch to the left, and I'd only have one eye.
Right.
And that wouldn't have been a problem if I was just wearing safety glasses at the time. So, yeah, just not wanting those things happening is a big... is a good thing to revisit mentally for me to, okay, well, when I'm telling these guys they got to do this, am I just yelling at them to check the box, or am I reminding them, look, it actually matters. Like if you go home with one less finger or one less eye, that's going to be a terrible scenario for anybody.
Right. I can see the safety poster now for safety glasses. When it comes to your eyesight, hindsight is not 20/20.
That's not bad. They've done a couple of events where they have guys, hey, submit an idea for your safety posters. So
Yeah. Well, someone out there, you can have that.
yeah, there you go.
This meal was brought to you by Truss Components of Washington. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next hot dish. And feel free to invite a friend for lunch next time.